what's like maybe the first thing you should do if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a dad that got served with divorce papers? What's the first thing you would do?
After you kind of get over the emotional, scary feeling of everything, start preparing. It's super important to be prepared. Don't stick your head in the sand and think, okay, I can just ignore this and someone else, like my attorney or somebody else, will just do this for me. A big believer, you got to be prepared. So that might be going into all of your bank accounts and making sure you kind of see what accounts you have and who's joined on what and how much is in those accounts. Or it might just be, hey, I'm the stay-at-home mom or dad that really doesn't know what's going on. So I'm going to do my best to walk around the house and look through drawers and kind of figure out, okay, I think there's some accounts, Wells Fargo or Bank of America. And so I'm going to write those down so that I can look into those more with discovery. So being prepared. If I have got kids, what kind of schedule might work for us if we aren't living in the same house? And then just kind of thinking big picture on a plan. Like I'm going to get through this. I've got to kind of have a temporary plan and then long-term plan. That's always my big push to folks is you can't make an informed decision unless you have all the information.
Hey, welcome to the WTF Divorce Podcast. My name is Rob Roseman. On this show, we talk about everything divorce, whether you're thinking about divorce, going through it, or figuring out life after. Divorce, co-parenting, dating. We cover it all and break it into short clips so it's easy for you to find and learn from. If you want more help, head on over to WTFdivorce.com. Thanks for listening. On to today's show. Real quick, let's talk about today's sponsor. The WTF Divorce Podcast is sponsored by OurFamilyWizard. If you're a co-parent, you know how frustrating it can be constantly going back and forth with your ex about the kids, schedule, and expenses. OurFamilyWizard helps keep everything organized in one app, making co-parenting communication less stressful. More about how OurFamilyWizard can help in a few minutes, but now, on to today's show.
All right, welcome to the WTF Divorce Podcast. Today we are doing another Ask a Divorce Lawyer. We're here with Jenn Geller. Jenn is a divorce lawyer in Georgia. Thanks for being here, Jenn.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right, so today we are going to be focusing on the beginning. I just got served divorce papers. I want to file for divorce, but I don't know what to do. And I think one of the biggest issues is, how do I save money? How do I keep this divorce from starting off the rails? So let's talk about that. What's like maybe the first thing you should do if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a dad that got served with divorce papers? What's the first thing you would do?
Yeah, so definitely. I'm a big believer that after you kind of get over the emotional, scary feeling of everything, start preparing. It's super important to be prepared. Don't stick your head in the sand and think, okay, I can just ignore this and someone else, like my attorney or somebody else, will just do this for me. I'm a big believer, you got to be prepared. So that might be going into all of your bank accounts and making sure you kind of see what accounts you have and who's joined on what and how much is in those accounts. Or it might just be, hey, I'm the stay-at-home mom or dad that really doesn't know what's going on. So I'm going to do my best to walk around the house and look through drawers and kind of figure out, okay, I think there's some accounts at Wells Fargo or Bank of America. And so I'm going to write those down so that I can look into those more with discovery. So being prepared, starting to think about where are my accounts, what if I have got kids, what kind of schedule might work for us if we aren't living in the same house, and then just kind of thinking big picture on a plan. Like I'm going to get through this. I've got to kind of have a temporary plan and then long-term plan. That's always my big push to folks is you can't make an informed decision unless you have all the information. And then in addition, having a good support system. And I kind of preach this all the time. You've got to have a good support system because your divorce attorney is not your friend. They're there to help you with the legal process. But information gathering is key once you kind of recover from the reeling of this is super scary and oh my gosh, I may or may not want this, but this is happening. Gathering information.
Right. And a lot of times our first move is we Google, we go on WTF Divorce, we're looking for a divorce lawyer for help. We schedule that consultation. We come in there and it's like, oh my God, they cheated or they're the worst parent. And like, is that what you want to hear at an ideal divorce consult? If it was your sister, your brother, your best friend getting divorced, how would you tell her to walk in the door? And as a divorce lawyer, what do you want to hear to help your client?
Yeah. So I need to hear information about what's going on with their finances and their kids, if they have kids, and, assets, debts, what's going on with their house if they have one, where do their kids go to school? Meaning like if If the parents are going to be, if they've got kids, where's everybody maybe going to be living in the future? Is someone thinking about relocating? Those types of things. I like to say that, yeah, those pieces of information about, someone's cheated, are helpful to you as the client, but really not so influential for the family court system. The only time I've really seen it be really influential has been, the spouse who's cheating brings the children around the new girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever, and it's pretty damaging to the kids. That's really when family courts matter. But otherwise, sadly, the family court system in the United States and in Georgia doesn't really seem to put that much weight on that factor. So emotionally, it matters to the client, but not so much in the family legal system. So I like to say, come in there informed and have some ideas of like what you want to ask the attorney. How does this process work? How does mediation work? What does it cost? What's the next steps? Are you settlement focused? Or are you going to make me go to trial or court for every single little thing? How do you work with other attorneys in the area? Have you ever heard of my spouse's attorney before and how they work with you? What do you know about the judge? Like all these questions, have them for going into the consultation and have basically like information to hand the attorney about, here's what I think we have financially. Here's what I think maybe might work for custody if we have kids. And here's kind of my general idea of maybe a plan. That's the nuggets of information that in a consultation attorneys want to know.
And as a person on the other side who's coming in, I know nothing. It's like I'm taking my car in with the engine just stopped. What's like a red flag or something where the attorney's not vibing with them? I don't love their answers. Like, what's something you should watch out for when you're having that first consultation?
What's something that you should look out for if you don't like the answers from the attorney?
Yeah, so when you have that consultation, it's kind of like a first date in a lot of ways. But like you said, that attorney is working for you. If I'm not feeling like I love the way they're talking about my case, is there one thing that you see with other attorneys where you're like, I would not work with that attorney?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one is if they're always wanting to push you to court, like court. I only do court. I don't do mediations. I don't settle. If they quote you some crazy retainer that's just astronomically higher than like every other attorney you talk to, that they're quoting you kind of like a trial retainer. That means that they're never really going to focus on settling and trying to get this resolved for your family. So crazy high prices that seem astronomically unreasonable compared to other attorneys you talk to. Someone who just seems like super aggressive, right? Like you can be aggressive if you have to go to court, and you can be aggressive, but yet settlement focused. You can do those things, but I like to say, trust your gut. Like if you're talking to an attorney and they just seem like they want to monopolize the entire conversation and they don't want to listen to you and they don't really seem empathetic to your situation and they kind of want to rush you and are not listening and are kind of doing 100 things while they're listening to you, I think those are some red flags. And then also if they also seem like they can't get along with other attorneys. Getting along with folks is, I think, a really critical piece of this because you have to be able to kind of give and take and negotiate and be able to kind of get some resolution and move forward. But if they're just wanting to fight constantly, that's a red flag. You don't want an attorney that has characteristics that are similar to like, oh gosh, this reminds me of my ex. They're either kind of acting narcissistic or crazy or intense. And you're like, God, this kind of rubs me the wrong way. Like trust your gut on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very helpful. Are there things that we all come in to talk to our lawyer about that as a lawyer, the courts do not care about this? The judges will not care about this. So save your time. Do you hear things come up a lot that you're just like, you instantly know nobody cares?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you kind of my top few. The first one is always cheating, unfortunately. It's cheating, especially when there's no kids. That's kind of like a really, really big one. I use this example all the time. I've literally had a case where there was kids involved. Mom cheated. Mom had an affair, had a new child during the marriage with this other man. The judge did not care, did not even grant the divorce on adultery grounds. I use that example all the time to show that like it just doesn't matter as much as you think it is. The court is looking at what is the best interest of the children. Is this person really like harming the kids? Is it causing any sort of damage emotionally, physically, whatever? And then looking at your finances and kind of looking at like a spreadsheet and typically dividing them in some way that's fair. That's the big one. I would say like overall arching, that's the big one. And then I would say the other big thing is this overuse of the word narcissism, right? Like, oh, my spouse is a narcissism. You just can't use the word. You've got to look at the behaviors. And I think it's just overused. And if you've got to focus on what the behaviors are, I would say those are the two top things, especially when there's no kids.
Yeah, that's helpful because again, there's the emotional side of it, and that's all the person knows, and there's the legal side of it, and that's if you want to save money, I guess that's a tip is stop focusing on those things.
Yeah. I will give you another example. It's not like this in every state in the United States, but in Georgia and a lot of other states, the judge that you might have, or the mediator that you might have, or even the attorneys that you might work with, on Monday, they deal with a rape case. And on Tuesday, they deal with a burglary. And on Wednesday, they deal with a homicide. And on Thursday, they deal with your divorce that has no children, and you have one house, and you might have $500,000 in assets between accounts. And the judge is just exhausted of it. These courtrooms are flooded with litigation, and they're overwhelmed. And it's not that they don't care. It's just they have to balance out what's most important. So, I mean, judges are human, and emotionally, they frankly just get drained. So at some point in some states, these judges are hearing all of the same things in the same courtroom. Now, in some states, it's you have a family law division or a family court division. And then so the judges are hearing criminal cases in a different docket or a different courtroom. But I tell my clients that a lot, that if you have a judge that's hearing both, you have to really remember, like, pick out what's really, truly important, because they really might have literally heard a child molestation the day before.
Good to know. Good to know that we don't see that side of it, and that's a very important side. When they're going home after our consultation, we have all this information. We're strategizing, gathering info. What kind of advice do you tell your clients to share or not share with their soon-to-be ex that might not have wanted this divorce, that might be prying for information? Do you keep your hand close to the vest? Do you just spew out all of your emotions and say, well, we're only doing this because of you?
Yeah. So I like to say less is more. I like to really say that you don't want to be sharing things at home unless you guys are super amicable. Like if you guys can get along really well and you basically are only using lawyers to do your paperwork because you guys are so amicable and you figured it all out, then great, talk away. But 99% of the time, that's not really what's going on. And if you're at home talking about your feelings and your emotions and what you told your lawyer, oh gosh, that's my big one. You're sharing what you told your lawyer, like you might as well just not have client confidentiality. So I like to say less is more. Don't talk to them about it. It doesn't, again, matter if you're mom or dad or husband or wife. It really doesn't matter. Just don't share that information, and use the lawyer. You hired the lawyer for a reason. You might even both of you might not even be using a lawyer. Maybe one person is, and then you're going to a mediator. Like, you have to protect yourself if this is what's going on. And in sharing that information at home really kind of puts you at a disadvantage. And I've had so many cases where someone goes home and shares lots of information, and then the spouse is bullying the other spouse into agreeing to things. And then it's like, well, why did you even spend all this money on an attorney to help you get a good settlement for you and negotiate something really great for you as an outcome? You might as well just have thrown the money in the dumpster. So I like to say you can still be polite. You can still be empathetic. You can still say, I know this is hard for you, but we've hired attorneys for a reason. So please have your attorney reach out to mine. That's it. It's simple and sweet and to the point.
That's such great advice, because especially if it's not contentious, you can find yourself kind of, let's work this out, let's divulge it. But you're saying when it comes to the legal things, say, that's why we have attorneys. I know this is frustrating. We're not used to not being a team. But yeah, that is very important to hear. So I appreciate that. One last thing. This is all in the news. I hear a lot about, I'll be honest, I don't even fully understand it, but the no-fault divorce. They're getting rid of it, or it's up for debate. I know this might be a political issue, but can you explain as a divorce lawyer what you hear about the no-fault divorce issues?
Yeah, definitely. So I like to say it's really not about gender or about who you are in the marriage or even politically where you're at on the spectrum. No-fault divorce basically means that it's legal in all 50 states. And basically it means you don't have to prove any kind of fault against your spouse. My example I always give is you can wake up one day and say, I don't like my spouse's hair color today and I want a divorce. And you don't have to prove that. You don't even have to prove what color their hair is. You can just even literally be like, I don't like the weather today. I want a divorce. And it's really beneficial for anyone in a marriage who wants to get out of it for whatever reason. You guys don't get along anymore. And here's why: it lowers conflict, and lower conflict means lower cost. And so there is kind of this kind of discussion in the media or in some legislatures and in some states about getting rid of it. And the problem that I think that for parties and spouses and families is that it will drive up conflict, it will drive up litigation costs, and quite frankly, it's going to give all divorce attorneys more money, right? So you would think some listeners would think, oh, well, that's great for this attorney, and this attorney would be all for it. No, it is not good for families and for spouses and for litigants. Because what happens is then you have to say, well, there's been no physical abuse, there's been no drug use, he or she is a great parent, we just don't get along. And then you have to prove that. And there might be some examples where you just literally can't prove it. I also like to give the example of the Truman Show, where there's recordings in everyone's houses 24/7. Like, most of us don't live like that. Most of us have Ring cameras nowadays, but we don't have cameras recording 24/7, inside of our homes. That's just weird. And so when you don't have the evidence to prove we just don't get along, then it just causes this hardship where you're like, if there was no more no fault divorce, you would have to basically prove we don't get along. And then the second layer of that is if there is physical abuse or there is drug abuse, as some examples, the more egregious ones, or there's adultery, then you have to prove it. So then you're spending all of this money having to go chase the proof, right? So some examples might be, let's say a spouse is using drugs and the drugs are out of their system and you don't have any drug tests. And typically drug users are not using out in broad daylight on Main Street, right? They're using in their house, and drugs get out of your system pretty quickly, other than marijuana or Delta-9. So that's a problem. What if you don't have drug tests? What if you don't actually have videos of them using? Then add the layer of physical abuse. Bruises go away. Sometimes someone is physically violent to another person, no matter their gender, and there's no bruises. There might be a hole in the wall, then the hole gets fixed. There might be adultery and there's no actual proof of the sex. People aren't having sex with their cheating, their cheaters out on Main Street. And then you've got to spend money to get a private eye to go chase the cheater. It drives up costs, and it's just bad for litigants. So then you have all this more money that's being spent. Then the court dockets are clogged up, which causes delay in any case, even the most amicable ones. So I'm a big proponent of not getting rid of no fault divorce. It's just easier. It's just easier for families to not have to prove it. You shouldn't, if you're in a marriage and you want to be able to get out of it for whatever reason, you shouldn't have to be forced to prove it. It's just not necessary, and it's bad for families, and I think it's bad for our country.
That's so interesting because, like we said, it can be politicized, like this little clickbait headline, that's going to solve all our problems if you really have to prove that you want a divorce because of these reasons. But just from a logistical standpoint, it's unrealistic. I think a lot of things that we wish went away just because we don't like divorce, and we all wish marriages would stay together. Doesn't sound like this is going to solve that problem.
Right. It doesn't. It
Awesome.
won't. It will make things a lot worse.
Jenn, thank you so much. That was a really interesting take on that. I hadn't heard that before. So I appreciate you being on. Everybody, if you want to find Jenn, let them know where they can find you. Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, it's Jenn Geller Law. On Facebook, it's Geller Law. And we'd love to have you guys give us a follow. Thank you, Jenn. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Rob.
The WTF Divorce podcast is sponsored by OurFamilyWizard. If you're a co-parent, you know how frustrating it can be constantly going back and forth with your ex about the kids, schedules, and expenses. OurFamilyWizard helps keep everything organized in one app, making co-parenting communication less stressful. Here's Maddie to explain how OurFamilyWizard changed her co-parenting life.
Before OurFamilyWizard, my co-parent and I were constantly arguing. We disagreed on the cost of our kids' activities. We would fight over whose turn it was to pick up our daughter from school. We had absolutely no boundaries. OurFamilyWizard has not only improved communication between us, but it has also saved my sanity. We use the shared calendars, expense tracking, and secure messaging on a daily basis. The ability to coordinate and share important information, plus manage expenses, has stopped the confusion and the fighting. This allowed us to put all our focus back on just enjoying the quality time we have with our kids.
Join more than 1 million parents and family law professionals who trust OurFamilyWizard. Go to www.ourfamilywizard.com/WTF and get free co-parenting tips and insights from family law and mental health experts. That's www.ourfamilyWizard.com. www.ourfamilywizard.com/WTF to get started today.